Hi, Travis. Thanks so much for your comment. I really appreciate it. It was a brilliant comment. It had me thinking a zillion different ways, trying to figure out. I really, really enjoyed it. And thanks for taking the time. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to respond to you because partly I'm trying to figure out how to respond to comments. I've come up with this idea of this experiment I'm doing right now of responding with a video to comments. And earlier I just looked into, I spent like a week looking into setting up a forum, uh, a, a discussion board on the website. But after a lot of times, it turns out my WordPress theme doesn't really match doing that. I looked into maybe doing a having associated with a Facebook group, and then I decided, well, I'm just going to emphasize comments because partly because of your comment made me think, hey, I'm just this is pretty good. I'm enjoying talking to this Travis guy, and also I'm thinking I'm a little isolated in now with COVID and my long crazy homeless man hair, as one of my high school friends called it. Um, that I just wanted to contact people like you more with comments. Okay, so your question. Let's see. My theory was that millennials were going to not do nearly as well as boomers because in about 5 years the boomers are going to start to die off, so the demand for homes are going to go off. And millennials, there's a lot right now, and there has been for like 5 years. The number of millennials hitting the first-time home buyer age has been increasing, but after about 2005, it's going to fall. There's going to be a little bit fewer every year. So those are two demographic changes, which are don't start for 5 years or so, will really keep demand flattish, or not going up nearly as much as it did for us boomers. So kind of the takeaway from that is don't expect to get a lot of appreciation. So it seems like a lot of equity your generation is going to get, your Gen Xer or the millennials, is not going to be from this huge appreciation that we boomers stumbled into. It's just going to be paying down the debt. So that's where the equity is going to come from. Do it the old-fashioned way, pay off your mortgage, and that used to be the way people did it. They'd have a 10, 15-year mortgage, then a 20-year mortgage, and then a 30-year mortgage. But it used to be a big party. That's how they retired. They wanted to pay off their mortgage before they retired, and they could live far more cheaply then. Particularly if you paid off your mortgage when you're 50s, and you can save a ton of money for 10 years and prepare for retirement that way. But now people just don't pay off their mortgage. It's kind of un-American or something. So, okay, so that's the demo. So my baseline is that things will be strong for about 5 years, and then weak. Right now, we're seeing, because of lower interest rates, that the market is really strong. And the way lower interest rates or any increase in demand tends to be is it tends to have a really slow effect. So an increase in demand tends to, or a lower interest rate tends to have an effect for like, I think I've seen studies say 3 years. It seems crazy, but let's say 2 or 3 years before the full impact is. Because let's say you now, because of the lower interest rate, you can borrow $20,000 more or whatever. And if everybody can do that, then as time goes on, everybody bids up the prices to where they were before on a monthly payment idea. So that's kind of the idea. The advantage to you now is since interest rates have fallen a little in the last 6 months, and they probably are going to fall a little bit more. I think they'll probably end up at 2.8s, 2.9s. Well, and if we go into a big recession, they can go into the mid twos. So this is the time where the prices haven't, or they're just starting to get monetized. The lower interest rates haven't been monetized into higher home prices yet, but they will be over time. Or if we go into a recession, they'll prevent prices from going down some or as much. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. You'd be better to buy on the one hand now versus later. Now, the other thing you said about, which is totally fascinating, is the idea that on inflation in new homes, that new homes, if inflation or interest rates do go up, the demand goes up, but their costs don't go up. So now you can pay more for a new home because of lower interest rates, but their costs of labor and wood hasn't gone up or whatever. So so there's an advantage there. Well, it turns out that they just raise their prices. I remember I was looking at a new home with a client like 2005. Yeah, 2005. This is late spring, early summer, and the new home guy said, "Yeah, well, we're and prices on this home have been going up $10,000 a month." So new homes are different than existing homes. New homes are much more sensitive to demand than existing homes. So if demand goes up for all homes a certain amount, prices for new homes will go up fast because it's being made by it's the kind of an oligopoly, the number of sellers. There's not that many sellers in any zip code. But for resale homes, it takes a lot longer. It's a slow process. I think from those studies, it's like a 2 or 3 year process before it has the full effect of a increase in demand is felt in prices. And also, if you're on the edge of town, there's the mix between new and resale. So if you're in an area with a lot of new, then they'll go up fast, and so they have a faster impact on resale prices because you're in an area with a lot of new, and that's the competition. So that's kind of why it's not that advantageous, is they just make more money. The, from the time they start or buy the land or whatever, it's like a 4 year process. Just because demand went up because interest rates fell, they don't have any more supply really. They can speed things up a little bit, but it's still a 4 year process between the time they uh, sell the home to the time they start buying the land, etc. So that's kind of my thinking on that. Okay, what was the other one you talked about? Oh, inflation. Yeah, the inflation issue. I should disclose that I'm terrible about estimating inflation. You probably don't know this, but people in the boomers were freaked out. It was scarred by the inflation of the time. Particularly our parents were scarred because they would saved up for years and years, and they would put all their money, this is common, in a savings and loan, and they would get 4%, and that's the way they did it. And then the savings loan would lend it out to mortgages at 5% or whatever. So there was a real small spread between them. So when inflation took off, now the money coming in for the savings and loans was 30-year mortgages at 5%. They can't pay people more than that. And so a lot of people are still getting 4%, but inflation is 8, so they're losing money. People were insanely upset by that. And that caused a whole bit of a change, caused kind of the ruin of the savings and loan because they were trapped, but also people moved into money market funds and the whole evolution of investing in the stock market and all those other products because of the inflation. But okay, so what happened was inflation came up, and those people who had locked in 1960 at 5% or whatever were doing great because now their monthly payment is going down because of inflation far more than it was expected. So they did really well. So I proposed this idea that could help millennials. But the disclaimer I want to make is I am terrible at estimating inflation. I remember when I bought our first home in the mid 80s, I thought my parents' generation are so lucky. My generation, we will never see 7% interest again in my lifetime. So that was wrong. And then another time I was incredibly wrong is in 2008-9 when there was a big bailouts. I thought, oh, they're doing all those bailouts. That's going to cause inflation to increase. Wow, absolutely 180 degrees wrong on that. So I do not understand inflation. I'm just saying theoretically, if inflation were to take off, that would benefit people that have mortgages. I think more likely right now is actually deflation. And we did see 1 month or 2 months this year where inflation went down. And that's a killer because if you did get deflation, that means all of your debts got bigger. And in the first few years of the Great Depression, they had deflation, which was killer, really killer. Because also, if things are going down in price, no one wants to spend money because you have cash in the bank and it's getting more valuable because of deflation. So you don't invest, you just don't spend. Things will be cheaper next month, so let's just wait and put off spending. So anyway, I'm kind of all over the place here, but it gives you an idea that I'm terrible at estimating inflation. But if we were to get in a couple of years inflation, that would be beneficial. I think that's a risky strategy, but what do I know? I think you're probably better off to try to minimize to pay as much down as you can. I would say buy now because we're going to get that effect of the lower interest rates, which should support things for a couple of years or so. But if you get a 20-year mortgage instead of a 30, that would be good. If you could put a lot of money down, that would be good. And the idea is you're going to be paying down the house, and then later on in life, you'll have a lot more money to invest. And then later on in life, you'll have a lot more money to invest in the stock market, whatever. Now, the stock people always say, well, if you took that money and you put it in so many dollars a week from the age 20, and then people don't do that. It's really uh, whether you're going to end up owning a mortgage like so many boomers right now still have a lot of mortgage where, our parents' generation had largely paid off their homes by the time they were boomer age. Now boomers keep having a lot of debt, which isn't as secure. But if you could get into a situation where the idea that you're going to pay it down and you'll own the house free and clear and then start investing big time into the stock market or whatever at that point, it also has an added benefit instead of stretching out the mortgage and starting to invest earlier or more earlier, is that you're more stable economically. So if something bad happens, sickness or job loss, you're a lot more stable economically if you can pay off the mortgage or if you've paid it down enough that you could take out a second loan in an emergency if needed, instead of having a lot of stuff in a retirement account. So anyway, that brings up the whole issue of retire IRAs being tax deductible, but your house equity isn't. Okay, I'm all over the place. Thanks so much, Travis. That was a great question. I really liked it. It helped spur me into thinking of trying to emphasize comments now, checking out and playing with, experimenting with, talking about video responses to comments. And I used to have a green screen. I found this great quilt. I kind of like it. I think I like it. I got the wings in my hair because I haven't had a haircut in 100 years. Great. So if, feel free to have a question. You could respond. I think you can respond to video or just respond in text. See how it goes. Thanks, man. Take care.